Hello, this is @TeachSmith. I'm an English secondary school teacher, and I've had a request on Reddit, no really I did, about how to approach close analysis and how to develop layers of analysis. What does it mean when examiners say or teachers say this needs to have further analysis, more perceptive analysis, more sophisticated ideas? I've chosen to use a quotation from London by William Blake to demonstrate this. So London is one of my favourite poems, and this is probably my favourite quotation from the poem, mine forged manacles. Just a note on this, it's a very useful quotation in terms of it only being 3 words with lots to say, lots of other poems to compare it to, but we'll come to that. So the first thing to say, what is he trying to say in this quotation? So, within the environment of London, within that oppressive, difficult environment of London, with all the rules, with all the poor conditions, you will end up placing limits on yourself. As a child, you are free, you have imagination, you can play very simple games, all of these things, but you will end up placing limits on yourself. Now, it is important to say that this quotation is a metaphor. However, do not feature spot. The most important thing to do is to say the effect of the quotation. Yes, it is a metaphor, but it's about placing those limits on yourself, which is why I've put that second. Now, this is the grade 4 sort of level, low C sort of thing, if you did this consistently throughout an essay, and of course if you did this with the second poem that you chose, and I'll come to what poem you could choose later, but this is the simplistic thing. Now, how do we build on this? So the easiest way to start is through single word analysis. So forged, metal being shaped in a furnace, using bellows in a blacksmith's, fire, heat, hammering with metals, shaping with tongs, cooling it in the water, then doing it again. It shows the struggle and the pain of people in London, and it also shows how difficult it is to reverse this process. Now, manacles. Chains for a prisoner or a slave. Very, very interesting that. Heavy and difficult to escape. This is not just handcuffs or, little chains, these are manacles. If you're studying Christmas Carol, as another text by the way, think about Marley's chains, for example, as well. So now we're more at the kind of 5, maybe 6 level. Now, what can we say next to build this up? Making links within the same poem. So these single word quotations are extremely useful. So we have chartered and wandered. Chartered means licensed, regulated, controlled, observed, surveilled, all these things. And it links to mine forged manacles, because in this very oppressive environment, the chartered Thames, the chartered streets, this is how someone is going to feel. Blake wanders through that. He wanders through the chartered streets. He wanders by the chartered Thames as an act of rebellion. He wants to show that he does not feel oppressed. He is trying to break out of this in his own way, in his own individual way. We're building on our thoughts and ideas. So Blake, he is a romantic. You could perhaps call him the grandfather of the Romantic movement. Now, what was the Romantic movement? It's about nature, returning to nature and the individual. Okay, the idea of society being very strict and controlled and industrial was very abhorrent to the Romantics. They wanted to return to the pastoral, they wanted to return to the countryside. And Blake is perhaps the grandfather of that vision, I would say, very loosely. So, moving on again. So, talking about context, Songs of Innocence and Experience. Okay, this is it, the collection of poems that includes London. Now, why is it called Songs of Innocence and Experience? Well, Blake saw innocence as childhood, saw innocence as a lack of rules, a lack of limitations, and it's a positive thing. And the first half of the book, the first half of the collection, was Songs of Innocence, and they're very positive, they're very joyful. The second half, the Songs of Experience, are much more, dark or sinister. And of course, London, as you might expect, is one of the songs of experience. So that's the Songs of Innocence and Experience. What can we then talk about next? Another poem in Songs of Innocence and Experience is The Tiger, and I thought I'd pick out this quotation, "In what furnace was thy brain?" because it links the idea of forging, in heat and fire and struggle and sparks and very frightening imagery almost. So where can we go next? Very, very, very important quotation this. Man is born free and everywhere he is in chains, by Rousseau. Rousseau would have been a contemporary of Blake. Blake was a very well-read person and he would have known about Rousseau's ideas. Okay, Rousseau is a philosopher and he's trying to say, in a similar way to I've explained about this quotation, that when we're children we have freedom, we have no limits, we have imagination, but we grow and develop chains around ourselves in terms of rules and regulations and putting limits on our own ambitions and ideas and our own imaginations. So man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. Now you notice there is a piece missing, so there is one more quotation that I found. It's difficult to free fools from the chains they revere. So Voltaire is saying that if you try to convince someone of something else, they try and convince someone that they should change their ideas and break out of their orthodoxies, then it's going to be a struggle. People like their limits. A little bit of an opposing idea perhaps to what Blake is trying to say and what Rousseau is trying to say. It's a very, very complex and subtle thing to include. What could you use this with? Okay, Ozymandias would be a great example. Okay, sneer of cold command from Ozymandias, where he is the tyrant oppressing people. So there's lots of different things you can talk about. Again, I must stress, do not do this for every single quotation, okay? The yellow squares or the yellow pieces are enough most of the time. The top row some of the time, and then going on from there occasionally. This has been at Teach Smith. Thank you very much for listening.